Foster care adoption is not a financial question. It's a heart question. I say that because after you spend $0 to $2,500 on the process, get the federal adoption tax credit, and the children you adopted receive free healthcare until age 18, this really isn't a money question. It's a decision you make with your heart. Are you willing to help a child or sibling group heal and thrive? Are you willing to adjust your life to be a child's forever family? But more deeply, are you willing to deal with your own past wounds and hurts to become an adoptive parent? Hi there. My name is Marcy Bursack, and I am your personal foster care adoption mentor. I've been through this experience myself adopting a pair of siblings. My heart for the remaining 113,000 children who are still waiting to be adopted led me to use a stimulus payment to publish the Forgotten Adoption Option, a 70-page guide through this process, and then launch this podcast a month later. Then in 2022, I wrote a children's book called Are You a Forever Family? And I launched the Forgotten Adoption Option app, which spells out exactly what to expect if you plan to grow your family through foster care adoption. You can find all of these resources at forgottenadoptionoption.com. I am so delighted that you're tuning in, and I want to welcome you to be real. Real about your heart. Real about any questions that are running through your mind. In Season 3, monthly episodes will cover strategies for thriving as an adoptive family. You might also enjoy Season 1, where you can hear personal stories of adoptive parents and adopted children, and in Season 2 episodes where guests explain how to adopt U.S. children who are waiting for you in the foster care system. Whether you want to begin the adoption process right now or in the future, my heart is to help conquer the confusion and fears of the foster care adoption process so that fewer children continue to wait to be adopted. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we're going to cover a very practical strategy for parenting adopted children. It's called Trust-Based Relational Intervention, or TBRI. I'm joined today by fellow adoptive mom, Kathy Searle. Kathy is the Vice President of Utah Programs for Raise the Future. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Marcy. It's nice to be here.
I love being able to connect like across country, all through the internet. It's an incredible thing. As a professional that has raised adopted children, Kathy has a lot to offer in terms of giving adoptive families tools to thrive. So we're going to get started in that space. So Kathy's not just a practitioner, but she's actually a lived experience person. So I think it's going to be so valuable for you and for listeners. To give you context, while I was already, Raise This Future has to me, one of the coolest social media presence online. And I had reached out to them because of that and asked if we could connect about an episode. And as I was brainstorming with the team, the Raise the Future team, about that, I traveled to Washington, D.C. for the Angels in Adoption leadership program. And I met the leader and the development leader for Raise the Future. So I feel like I've been able to meet so many wonderful, lovely people that are doing great work there. So I'm excited for Kathy to be able to bring some of those nuggets to us in her own lived experience. So Kathy, we'll start with, as an adoptive mom, how old were your children when you adopted them? Maybe like when you met them and then when you adopted them. And did you already have any biological children in your home when you adopted?
So we had 3 biological children. They were like 8, 6, and 3 when we started looking at adoption. We've adopted 8 kids total. We have
okay, that's 11, right? You have 3 biological.
That is 11.
I just went, okay, 11 it is. I love that.
Yes, 11 kids. So our first adoption was international adoption from Colombia, and he was 12 months. Well, we met him when he was 11 months, and brought him home, and we finalized actually in country. So he was 11 months. 2 years later, we adopted his half brother, who was 6 at the time. And then we adopted a little boy, a baby out of Texas, who was headed to foster care, but we took him before that. And then about 18 months later, we adopted a little girl, again, private adoption out of Philadelphia. So she was,
folks. I was going to say, we're halfway there. We're 4 of the 8. This is it. Okay.
Yeah. Both of them were 2 weeks old at birth. The little girl was considered a healthy infant. The little boy was fetally exposed to drugs and alcohol. So let me think. Okay, then we adopted a 13-year-old out of foster care. She was placed at 13. We adopted her when she was 14. Then we adopted a 10-year-old. She was almost 11 by the time we finalized with her. And then we had been sponsoring a girl to go to school in Ethiopia. And they were bringing some kids over to, highlight the program. 100 girls tried out. 10 made the team.
Wow.
Found out that our little girl made the team and actually found out she had a sister. And so they asked us, can they stay with you while they're here? And out of those 10 girls, they were the only 2 that didn't have both parents.
Oh.
So we had said, unless they're dropped on our doorstep, we're not adopting anymore. And kind of in real life, they were dropped on our doorstep. So,
wow.
Yeah, those were our last 2, and we adopted them in 2007. So.
Such a beautiful story. So what I'm taking away so far is you felt a need and you met it. You weren't thinking about sequence and birth order. You were just like, there's a need. And because it sounds like you had some older kids while you had some younger kids too.
Yes, our youngest biological child was displaced in the birth order twice, unfortunately, with 2 kids that had pretty high needs. So I think there were some struggles for her, obviously. But, the other side of that, she's just a warm, caring individual and has a big heart. And the research will tell you, don't disrupt the birth order. But I always, when families ask me that question, I always say, your family the best. And, if you feel like your kids can handle that, then go for it. Because, sometimes it works out really well, but, you have to at least pay attention to the research. Now, we were not informed enough to even know about the research when we were doing what we were doing. So, luckily, it all worked out well and everybody's fine. So,
And you kept doing it. So I think that's really great for listeners to hear, especially because it's one thing to see the research. And there's value to research in our lives, right? But when you live it out and you're like, yeah, that's what it said, but like it worked for us. Like, I think that there's some great wisdom in that if there's someone out there that's thinking, well, I already have this age and I thought I shouldn't go older, Kathy's done it. And there are ways to do that. So that's great encouragement for listeners. So by day, you work professionally in the foster care adoption space. Can you tell our listeners about what Raise the Future does and then what your role is within the organization?
Certainly. So at Raise the Future, we believe that every young person should go through life with one caring adult. And so we work day in, day out to find families for kids in foster care and then to support those families afterwards. So basically, we run recruitment programs for kids 9 and up. And then we also run family support programs to support families after. A lot of times people think that the finalization is the ending, but for those of us who know, it's really only the beginning. And our kids aren't miraculously healed from trauma at the time of the finalization. And we know now through research that even children adopted at birth can have some grief and loss and, have some traumatic events that occurred in utero and then possibly right after. So we have to be aware. Even I think families think, well, if I adopt a newborn, then I'll avoid any problems. And I've talked to thousands of adoptive parents over the years, and that simply isn't true. Children are as different as stars in the sky, and you get what you get. And I always believed that if we felt good about it, that we would have the skills to handle it. And we have for the most part, but you also have to do your own work to seek out resources and, the things that your child needs so that you can meet those needs in the best way that you can.
Yeah, I love what you said about finalization, which would be like adoption day, right? Like actually legally signing that paperwork and having that moment the lifetime is from there forward, and you've already been living together. And so that's really encouraging and good advice for people to know that, when you say yes to this, there's so much more after getting to that place, which is a big piece of what I'm hoping we can talk about, because you're trained in this model, which I personally went through this model. It's the woman's name is Dr. Karen Purvis. She has her own conference. She has a book. She actually recently passed away, which was super sad. But it's out of a university in Texas. And so I love that you're able to take that to our listeners, because to me, it feels like I went to the conference and sat and listened, and now we get to listen to Kathy teach us the principles. So in the adoption realm, the parenting strategy is trust-based relational intervention. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, which is why people acronym it into TBRI.
Right. Exactly.
I'm wondering if you can, from like a layman's version, can you tell us like what does this approach entail? Like what is trust-based relational intervention?
So just if anybody's Googling, Karen is spelled with a Y,
Very good point.
K-A-Y-R-N, Purvis, and it's the Karen Purvis Institute for Child Development out of Texas Christian University. So yeah, TBRI is an amazing journey, I will say, learning journey, because I'm continuing to learn. People think if they become a practitioner that they know it all. And because it's a lens and it's a way to view the world differently, you continually learn more about it as long as you're, studying and keeping up with things. There's so many things you can learn online. There's if you look up Karen Purvis, you'll see YouTube videos and there's all kinds of stuff. But the basic premise of it is we have a child that has a need and we meet the need. And if we can do that consistently over time, that heals the brain from the trauma that the child's experienced. The model is basically a caregiver series that Texas Christian put out. And it was initially implemented for adoptive parents. But here at Raise the Future, actually my team, we've trained biological parents, we've trained foster parents, we've trained school teachers, anybody can benefit if you have a child in your life. The great thing that parents tell us about it is that you can go to a training and have a tool to go home and use, which as an adoptive parent, I've sat through a lot of trainings where they talk a lot about theory, right? And give you all this theory about the brain or about behavior and cognitive behavioral type stuff, the thinking and the doing. But this actually gives you tools to use immediately. And as you start to use those tools and they work miraculously, then you're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I need to learn more. And then you learn more. And I've sat through probably 5 caregiver series myself. And then I've trained probably about that many as well. And every time I either train it or are in it, I learn something new because I'm in a different place in my life at that point, right? And I'm seeing the world from a different viewpoint because I'm older. I've had different experiences since the last time that I heard about it. And so things will come into my mind that I should use this or I should do that. I also am a licensed clinical therapist and do therapy with adopted kids and adoptive parents. And so I'll have not only my own kids in mind, but I'll have a client in mind of, oh, next time I meet, I got to tell mom this, because I think she could try this and it might be really helpful. And things like, I had one of my clients where the kids were coming out of the school and they were just horrible on the ride home, just lots of meltdowns and everything. And I said, well, why don't you take a really, like a granola bar, some kind of healthy snack and a bottle of water. And as soon as they get in the car, hand it to them and see how it goes. And she was like, oh my gosh, night and day difference. And I'm thinking, it's kind of like when we're driving home from work or getting home from work, we're just not in the best space because we're totally just hungry and stressed. And we have to think about it, our kids in that same way. They coming out of school, it's stressful. They have a lot of things that they need to be learning. And just that getting hydrated and something in their tummies can make all the difference. Simple, but a lot of times we don't think about that. But TBRI, the empowering section of TBRI, talks about sensory needs and what those sensory needs are in terms of hydration, in terms of our perceptions of things. Like, I could go in deeper, but I won't. Things like just a swinging motion, how that regulates us. There are things that we can do for kids that a swinging motion might really help them. Like I had a client, the sister would come home every day from school and go outside and swing. And then she would regulate and then she'd come in and they'd finish the day. Where if you have a really rigid schedule of, no, you can't go swing right now, you've got to have your snack and start your homework or whatever. But this little girl had found out that that's what she needed. Mom recognized that's what she needed. She allowed her to have it. And then the day went smoother. But if mom said, no, you can't go out and swing, you got to do this and this and this, big blow ups. So it's really simple things that when you know the model, you recognize, oh, this is a need. I need to meet this need. And when you meet the need, the behaviors just dramatically improve. It's really quite amazing.
And for listeners that are thinking, oh, I'm not there yet, this makes sense. I can relate on many ways of what a blow up looks like with a child. And I think what's so interesting is that even though the approach sounds simple, right? Sometimes we can so quickly overlook what that is. And I wonder if you could give us some ideas, like what if we're in this situation right now or in the future, and it is hard, it is difficult because there is some sort of behavior, the child is non-compliant or throws a fit or anything in between or bigger, right? Like what should we be looking for, looking at, and where do we get our ideas from on how to think of it differently?
One of the things that we do with TBRI is we talk about brain development and how the brain develops. So understanding the brain and knowing in the brain, there are neural pathways. So when we get kids that are older, they have certain neural pathways of ways they cope with the world. So when we ask them to cope with the world in a different way, it's like we're asking them to hack down a jungle in terms of the neural pathway in their brain. That's really hard. So even if we're working with them and they're doing really good with this new behavior or this new routine, when they get stressed at all, like hungry, thirsty, tired, they're going to go back to that neural pathway that's easy for them, which might include some behaviors that we're not really fond of. So understanding that what we're asking kids to do may seem really simple to us. For example, I had a client that I think he was 7 at the time. Anytime that mom asked him to go and do any kind of chore that was away from her, he would do it halfway. And so because of his attachment needs, I said, well, how about if you only ask him to do things that are in the room that you're in with him, or you go with him to do the chore? Because really, this little boy was probably 7, but developmentally, because of his trauma, he was more like 3 or 4. So then I also asked mom, would you be asking a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old to do the task you're asking him to do? And she's like, no. And it's like, so maybe we need to go back and start over again at a younger age with tasks that meet that need of that younger age, and then move him up. So eventually he'll get to 7-year-old tasks, but not asking him, because he's not a normal 7-year-old. He was in a really bad situation for the first 2 years of his life, lots of neglect, lots of didn't get enough food to eat, those kinds of things. And so to do a task away from mom really stressed him out. But he was super smart. So you think, he can do math, he reads, he's super intelligent. Why can't he take the trash out to the trash can outside the house? Why can't he do that? It's well, right now you're his safe person. You're the one that helps him to regulate. So he needs a task that he can do either with you or with you in the same room. And so she made a change that way. It was hard to especially with him being so smart, to ask him to do things you would a 3 or 4-year-old, but he was able to be successful at those versus him not being successful with 7-year-old chores and then feeling worse about himself because he's not able to get those done. Many times our kids that have these brain differences, they need more support than a normal kid, even if they are really, really smart. Because mom kept saying, he's so smart. And I said, yeah, he is really, really smart, but developmentally, he needs more support.
I'm chuckling on this side of the screen going, man, if we were like a caller-driven radio show right now, I'm like, Kathy, we could do a whole hour. Because I'm I can think of my own personal situations to be so can we break this down? Can I hire you to be a consultant? That's so good. So what if there is someone like that thinks, okay, you've piqued my interest, that sort of fits something I can relate to, but man, I want more. Mm-hmm. Where do you point people? Are you available? Do you point them to other resources? What do you do?
We serve 3 states, so Utah, Colorado, and Nevada. So if they're any of those 3 states, they can do a caregiver series. They can also look on the Karen Purvis Institute of Child Welfare, TCU, just put any of those Google things in, get in there, and then they can find a practitioner in their own state, because they are all over the country, and then reach out to them to find a caregiver series. And the caregiver series is, depending on how it's taught, anywhere from 3 to 4 days. And you learn first that brain stuff that we just talked about and how drugs and alcohol affect the brain, how trauma affects the brain. And then you go into, you have 8 hours or 6 hours on connecting. So mainly just connecting with your child, connecting with your child, connecting with your child, and then empowering. That's the sensory needs and, figuring out the why behind behaviors, and then correcting. We spend very little time on correcting, because if you really connect with the child and you empower the child, the need for correction is diminished quite a bit. Which, if in the training, we talk about, we have a pyramid where there's lots of correcting. Most of us do lots of correcting, and not as much connecting or empowering. And this model flips that over. So before you correct, you have to catch yourself and think, okay, what's going on here? I need to connect. So instead of, hollering and saying, I told you to take out the trash, you made it halfway, the bag's sitting at the back door, you need to do this. And you know how we get, I've told you, you know how to do this. And we start putting a lot of words out, which that's a mistake with doing TBRI, fewer words for our kids, because as soon as they flip their lid and have their prefrontal cortex online, they're not hearing you anyway, right? So instead, you would kneel down and say, hey, baby, what's going on? I know you can do this. What's happening right now? And you talk to the kid and connect with the kid. And the kid might say, it's dark outside and I don't really want to go out there. I'm really scared. Last time I was out there, I heard a dog barking and I'm afraid that, whatever. But if you come at him and are in a way shaming him, you're never going to find out that he's afraid of the dark and that he thinks there's a dog out there. So connecting is the main way that we find out what the need is. And then we are able to meet the need, and we see that diminished behavior. It's the most amazing model. I wished I would have had it years ago with my kids, because the thing of it is as adoptive parents, we feel like we're fine. And then they give us these kids with hard behaviors and we go, wait, it's not me. I've raised other kids and done well. It's not me, it's this kid. But what it really is the two of you together have an issue and a problem. And so we have to take a step back and think, how am I contributing to this problem? And for me, I like words. And so I would talk my kids to death with lectures and different things like that. And the main thing I learned from TBRI is I need to be quiet and I need to listen and look for the why behind the behavior. And once you start to do that, it's amazing what you find out. And the connection that you have with your kid is so amazing, because you go from feeling annoyed a lot of the time to really just loving this kid and understanding this kid in a way that makes it so that you both can get your needs met in ways that you weren't able to before.
Which is really neat to hear. Thank you for your vulnerability of, hey, I could have done this differently. And it's not, I know I'm one to be very wordy too. So that's, to me, I'm like, oh, that's really good to hear. So, okay, we've gone over some examples about trash and about chores. Other things that come to mind to me are like homework. Do you have any tips if kids don't want to do their homework?
What I found over the years, and I've done many, many years of homework, and as a therapist, I hate homework. And I've written notes for parents to say this child is not going to do homework. Because when you think about a child who could be delayed in many areas, just being in school all day is super, super stressful. And then to come home and have to deal with homework, it damages the parent-child relationship. And I don't believe in it. If you do and your school does, then you're going to have to find ways to work around it. I think the best suggestion would be to hire someone, or like we had a large enough family that like if anybody needed math homework help, I had my older daughter, she's the math tutor. Hey, Katie, come and help us, and it was different with a sibling helping than me helping. Because those hard times, they damage that connection, because you're having this expectation. And with kids who really struggle with homework, it's because the homework's too difficult. Kids who can do the homework well, generally, will come around and do it unless it's too much homework. And then it's like, go to the school and say, hey, we're spending 2 hours a night on homework and they're in school for 6 hours. How can we make this look different? And some teachers are really good to work with, some are not as much. And especially in elementary, you have the right as a parent to say, no, we're not going to do this much homework every night. I'm sorry. And if your child doesn't get a good grade, who the heck cares? Because nobody, and like, how many people have their 5th grade report card and pull it out and show it to anyone? Doesn't matter.
Valid point. Yeah. Yeah.
Your
And
child and your relationship with your child matters more than if they get a D in spelling. Sorry, I have big opinions about that.
No, I appreciate big opinions. I think it gives us perspective, and it gives us ideas, because I'm thinking, I don't know that I'm married to an educator, but he's the art educator. He doesn't assign homework, right? And so it's neat to hear, hey, have you ever thought about asking for these things for your children? Hey, have you been aware that these are things that you have the ability to think about? So I think you put some really good thoughts in people's heads. I wonder, kind of swiveling just a little bit. So I had mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity to go to a local Empowered to Connect event. I don't think Karen was teaching. I could be wrong. I remember there being a couple on stage, but at the time, I remember the audience was people like me that was like a future adoptive parent or an adoptive parent, social workers. That I heard that Raise the Future is working on training educators and other people, kind of as you mentioned in the early part, other people that adoptive children interact with. Can you tell us about that initiative?
Yeah, there's actually a curriculum for educators, and my family support director right now is training educators. All day yesterday and today, she's training educators that actually asked us to come train them. And then 2 weeks ago, we went down to the middle part of our state and again trained all educators. So educators love this model because it works and it helps them with their classrooms. So there is curriculum out of TCU that is for educators. It's the caregiver model. What's the word? Just modified to use for educators. In our Nevada office, they're actually going into a school and training every single person in the school on TBRI so that it can be a TBRI school. Teachers love this model. They really do. Because when you're looking at meeting the needs of the kids, you diminish quite a bit any kind of behavior problems. Usually kids that have behavior problems, they either don't understand or they understand it and are bored. I mean, or maybe they're having a really bad day and they just need, a snack and some water and come back to the classroom when they're feeling a little bit better. Maybe they're overstimulated by all the kids or by the noise. A lot of our kids that have experienced trauma are very overwhelmed by a lot of noises. So if the classroom's really chaotic that day, that might be too much for this particular child, and working out a time where they can go sit with the school secretary for an hour during that time and do whatever they need to do. You can be so creative when you understand this model. It's almost like you have anything that you can think of that relates to meeting the need of the child and regulating the child is fair game. And we've seen people come up with the most creative ideas of how to meet the needs of kids. It's amazing. It's your brain and the model together can be magic.
So neat. This idea of being a TBRI certified, that's amazing. So a couple kind of wrap up questions from things that you've shared. So if I'm an educator, because I know we have several educators that listen to this, and they're outside of your 3 states, how would they go about do they go to the TCU website? How would you help them get that kind of training to their school?
Yeah, all of the practitioners throughout the country are listed on, well, actually throughout the world are listed on the TCU website. So they could reach out. They can reach out to TCU and just say, hey, I'm an educator. I want to learn more. They might be able to be hooked up with, I know now they're allowing some online. For the longest time, nobody did anything online. And now everybody's figuring out that it's okay. And they might be able to find someone who is doing the educator series as virtual and be able to join it that way. Don't give up. Reach out to one of our offices, reach out to me, and we'll try to get you hooked up because it is so valuable and so life-changing, and it just makes life better. I mean, we use this in our office with colleagues. I use it all the time when I get annoyed or irritated with someone. It's always like, I wonder what's happened to them. I wonder what's going on. And even in our office, sometimes it will be like, do you need a snack? And we'll laugh about it, but sometimes it is that, they've been in meetings back to back and it's 2:00 and they're really hungry and thirsty.
Just the basic need of that. And just a reminder, TCU is Texas, Christian, okay, let me try it again. Texas Christian University, too many words in a row. And Kathy, a couple of things that people might be wondering that you shared is you mentioned that in terms of trauma, that there's trauma when you're coming out of foster care or the foster, in that space, you're adopted. Can you kind of, if people have no idea why or what that means, can you kind of give us why and some examples about where that trauma stems from?
Well, even as a young infant, as a baby cries and a person comes and meets that baby's need, then the baby soothes. And you think about like an infant, a newborn infant, that happens thousands of times in a day, right? And so we're teaching this baby that if they have a need, the need's going to be met. For our kids, they cried and no one came. And that happened over and over and over. So what that taught them is the world isn't a safe place and that the only person that can meet my needs is me. And so those kids grow up with attachment difficulties because they look at us as parents and think, I've been on my own all these years. Why do I need you? There's nothing that you're going to be able to do for me. And then there's this competing demand of we're all wired to connect. We're born to connect with people. So we have this also competing desire to connect, but we're terrified if we do connect because we're going to get hurt. So also if there's physical abuse, if, sexual and emotional abuse, that trauma changes the chemical reactions in the brain. There's a chemical in the brain called cortisol. And when the brain is stressed, the brain is bathed in this cortisol, which is not a good hormone for our brains. And it puts us on high alert. So you think about if you've ever been really, really, really scared, our kids are like that 24/7. They're always on high alert and they rarely calm down, even in their sleep. A lot of our kids that have experienced trauma, they don't sleep well. They're not good sleepers. And part of that is they've had negative experiences in the night or that they just don't trust that they're really, really safe. One of the things we teach with TBRI is felt safety. Now, we know our kids are safe, right? You lock the doors, you know that your home is safe. But it's different in terms of, do you feel safe? I have an adult daughter recently that she was in a situation. I said, have you ever felt safe? And she paused for a minute and she said, no, not really. And I'm thinking she's early 30s and this poor girl has never felt safe. Had I known back when she was 10, that she didn't feel safe, could I have done things differently so that now as a 30-year-old, she would feel safe? But coming at it from an adult point of view, it's like, what? Of course my kids feel safe. Why wouldn't they feel safe, right?
When our backgrounds are different. So I'm glad that you talked about cortisol and what that does to the brain, because then it pours into the other part that you shared about loud noises. And so there's this like constant alertness, right?
Right.
Kathy, this has been so good. I feel like you have given equipment to people as they raise their children, as they raise the future. So I just want to say thank you for your time and thank you for all the trainings you've gone through and the families you've sat with, because I think everyone has benefited from what you've shared today. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping to raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 113,000 adoptable children in the United States. By leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, and talking about this podcast, you can help a child and sibling groups find their forever family. If you only have time to do one, sharing is the most impactful way to help a child who is waiting to be adopted. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling group through the foster care system, please visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find how to get started using my new and free Forgotten Adoption Option app, and you can even order a copy of my book for adults, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which guides you through the entire process And you can find my book for children of all ages, Are You Forever Family? You can pick from paperback, audio, and ebook formats, and you might even be able to find my books at your local library. Please keep me in mind as you're thinking of gift ideas and guest speakers. If you have any question about the process, or you're wondering if you're even qualified to adopt, please reach out. Please send your friends and family my way too. You can easily find me by searching for Marcy Bursack on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I intentionally carve out time each week to encourage and teach people just like you. I really appreciate you tuning in, caring, and sharing, because every child deserves to be in their forever family.